On my left-hand side, I've got Mr. Makwana, who is the Eskom chairman. Next to him is Mr. Calib Cassim, the interim group chief executive. Next to him, it's Mr. Begin Numalo, the generation group executive. And next to Mr. Becky, it's Mr. Sehomocho Skippers, the transmission group executive. And lastly, it's Mr. Monde Bala, the distribution group executive. Let me take this time, colleagues, to welcome all of you to our media briefing, those that are in attendance in person and those that have connected remotely. We also have our other stakeholders that have connected, that have joined in for this briefing. The purpose of the briefing is to take you through our state of the system, or the status, to take you through the status of our system or the grid system, particularly focusing on the winter outlook. And our program for today, we will be having high-level remarks from the chairman, Mr. Makwana, and presentations from our panel members, and question and answers, and then a 15 minutes media interviews. So as you would know, we have scheduled today's briefing for 2 hours. So the 1 hour 45 minutes we'll use for the briefing, and the 15 minutes will be for the interviews. Before we start, or I give over to Mr. Makwana, let's do the safety evacuation. Mr. Emmanuel Makoba will take us through the safety evacuation. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome in Franklin Auditorium. In the event of an incident in the building, we have a PA system in the room. We will receive the message from the control center. We listen to the message, then you take your belongings. However, before you leave the room, please help people with disability if they are in the room. And we have 4 emergency exit doors. I have 2 doors on my left. I have another 2 doors on my right. Please use the 2 doors on my left, go out and take the staircase down, go through the security checkpoint, and then outside there next to the pool there is assembly point number 2. We can assemble there with our attendance register. If the 2 doors on my left is blocked, then you can use the 2 doors on my right. Is a passage, you go out and take your right. At the end of the passage is a glass door. Go through that glass door and take your right again and take the same staircase down to assembly point number 2. If the staircase is blocked, you go straight as you go into the building. By the retail stores, you take your right and go through the security checkpoint. Then in front of you, you will see the car park. Next to the car park, there is assembly point number 1. We can also use that assembly point during the emergency. Should you need to report anything in this room, any safety hazard or any emergency, from your cell phone, you dial 011-800-6666 or 011-800-4441. Should a fire starting in this room On my right, on the passage there, we have 2 fire extinguishers. We can use that fire extinguisher to extinguish the fire. Only those colleagues who trained to fight the fire can help us with that part. On those 2 nearest assembly points, we wait there until our safety officers come and address us if the building is safe and clear. And then you come back to the same room and continue with the business of the day. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Makoba. Over to you, Chairman, if you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daphne. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Good morning to all members of various media houses that have joined us this morning. Greetings to members of the public. Greetings to our Eskom employees, Eskom guardians. It is our privilege this morning on behalf of the Eskom board, on behalf of the management and the employees of Eskom, to brief the South African nation on the status of the electricity system and the winter plan. Our obligation as a power utility in South Africa, as required by the Grid Code and our licensing conditions of the NRS, places a responsibility on us to inform our customers on the status of the system when it becomes evident that the performance of our power system will adversely affect their way of conducting business. The National System Operator under the Transmission Division plays a crucial role in ensuring the reliable and efficient operation of the power system through balancing the dispatchable energy and ensuring the integration of renewable energy resources. Our power system is severely constrained, largely due to poor maintenance of the Eskom coal fleet, but we have our newly appointed executive, Mr. Begin-Ngumalo, and also other executive colleagues, as have already been mentioned at the table, who will expand further on this briefing, the details. With the winter season upon us, the power system will be even more constrained. The weather forecasters are anticipating a much colder winter season, as we also saw with the rains in the last couple of days, that there's clear patterns of weather change in our country. And these challenges will result in high electricity demand as heating of our homes and spaces is required. As has been stated in many previous updates, rotational load shedding is implemented from the National System Operator perspective, managing the power system to mitigate the probability of a total system collapse or a total countrywide blackout. The Board of Directors reported in our update of earlier this year that we had approved a 24-month generation fleet turnaround and recovery plan, which is being implemented in earnest. We are 21 months now towards the attainment of the penultimate goal of 70% EAF by 31 March 2025. We're in full support, as the board, we're in full support of the Eskom management in their efforts to improve the performance and the life extension of the generation coal-based power stations. We fully comprehend the adverse impact that rotational load shedding has on South Africa's already fragile economy and its people. We're doing everything to mitigate the intensity of rotational load shedding, including taking lessons from the rest of the world. Often, load shedding is seen as a uniquely South African phenomenon, but we've seen that effective rotational load shedding during winter months requires a coordinated effort among all stakeholders within a country. While South Africa has implemented a successful rotational load shedding program that schedules power outages based on a rotating roster, ensuring that the entire country experiences equal downtime and the burden of rotational load shedding is spread across all regions and industries. We continue to draw valuable lessons from global best practices and country-specific case studies. Lessons from Vietnam, from Japan, and Australia provide useful insights on how we as Eskom, government and industry leaders can improve electricity supply and resilience during winter. Eskom's debilitating impact on South Africa's economy and its competitiveness is undeniable. The Board of Directors is working tirelessly with all our key partners and shareholders to turn the tide on this negative reality. As you will see from the management's presentation, we are implementing a host of interventions ranging from improving our plant availability, increasing the utilization of plants that are traditionally meant for peaking, and intensifying interventions to reduce demand. These interventions are critical for us to reduce the impact of load shedding in the short term. However, more interventions are required to ensure sufficient energy to support South Africa's economic growth in the medium term. The board, through the Business Operations Performance Committee, is working to assist the generation team in ensuring that the recovery of the plant performance is sustainable. This includes ensuring that we improve our collaboration with industry, NECOM, and the several government departments. The generation recovery plan depends on focusing on the recovery of 6 priority power stations, namely Tutuga, Majuba, Kendal, Matla, Duba, and Kusile power stations, while sustaining performance of our best performing power stations, Medupi, Matimba, Letabo, and Peking. We've also seen improvement at Camden Power Station, one of our oldest power stations, and we believe with dedication and focus we can also get similar results from Hendrina, Grootvlei, and Arnott power stations. We have stabilized leadership in the division by deploying experienced former power station managers to roles that give leadership and depth to areas of concern, including within our primary energy division. The 3 units at Kusile Power Station, in terms of their recovery, is underway, and we should see the units returning to service in November, December 2023. We also welcome the debt relief that we received from National Treasury. It will certainly go a long way in ensuring that the much needed capital, CapEx, funding that is required to plan well in time and execute adequate full maintenance and refurbishment required in various existing power stations. While we are expecting to go through winter for the first time this year without the 960 megawatts that are available from Kuberg Unit 1, it is a necessity to ensure completion of the life extension and steam generator replacement. The unit is scheduled to return to service in September 2023, and a month later, Unit 2 outage will follow. The plan remains to end the financial year 2024, so 31 March 2024, with energy availability factor at 65%. Beyond our own generation capacity, we are also vigorously pursuing the transmission development plan, including fast-tracking the setting up of the National Transmission Company, whereby we have numerous projects at different execution stages for the expansion of our transmission grid to allow for the connection of new generation and generators and provide for the grid stability. On the 24th of April, we held our national demand-side management indaba, with emphasis on a collaborative initiative with our customers and energy-intensive users in collectively implementing demand management response initiatives. India has been implementing a national demand-side initiative and offers valuable insights for us to learn from. Our own past successful campaign, 49M, some of you may or may not recall this, has foundational homegrown experiences that inform our approach as well. As I have mentioned earlier, that this coming winter season will be challenging, I believe another mechanism to curbing the higher stages of load shedding is through implementation of demand management responses. The best lesson from world-class high-performing organizations is that organizations with best people win. This strategic focus is much needed to ensure sustained improvement of Eskom's performance. I'm pleased that this is top of mind to our Head of Generation Division and our Human Capital Executive. We have also made good progress with a search for a new leader for Eskom. We should soon be appointing the new Group Chief Executive once we have concluded all the board and shareholder processes as outlined in our MOI. Dealing with corruption is central to creating an uplifting work environment, as well as being partner of choice to suppliers and OEMs that aspire towards ethical values and best practice. Corruption undermines value creation and is an enemy of progress. It must be uprooted completely so that it does not hinder our effort of performance improvement. Working through NECOM streams, we see the fruits of collaboration between our internal forensic department, SAPS, and the SIU in dealing with cases of corruption. Numerous arrests and prosecutions are underway. People are being brought to book before the courts. We also take note of what the former GCE said in his book. It must be noted and placed on record that trust was broken by him making those public statements and the publication of the book. And this trust was broken in the most repulsive manner possible. Transgressions in the duration, in the course of publishing this book, transgressions were carried out by an executive who was in a fiduciary position, in possession of proprietary information of a national key point, who himself evaded being vetted by processes that involve our National Security Services Agency, and most importantly, breaches occurred in terms of the Protection of Personal Information Act, various aspects of an executive director's duties as defined in the Companies Act, the PFMA, and his own contract of employment losses on confidentiality. Our corporate governance teams are reviewing all this and will take appropriate and reasonable steps to ensure that the board takes all necessary action. We will also, through the Audit and Risk Committee of the board, be embarking on an independent investigation to get to the top of and veracity of the allegations made. We are continuously looking at mechanisms, processes, and practices to improve the quality of our internal controls to root out the negative parasitic effects of unethical behavior and corruption. A reliable and effective electric grid is vital for the growth and development of any country. Countries that invest in building a robust electric grid are better equipped to power industrial growth, to support the economy, and foster sustainable development practices. Successful countries that have a well-established electric grid often enjoy increased economic prosperity, higher standards of living, and improved quality of life. Efficient electric grids also help in reducing energy waste, minimizing greenhouse gases, emissions, and protection of the environment. On this note, I wish to now hand over to our acting group executive, Mr. Calib Cassim, our divisional executives, Ms. Mbeki Ngumalo, Sohumojo Skiepers, and Monde Bala, to take you through the operational details on the status of the system and the winter plan. With that, thank you very much. Over to you, Caleb.
Good morning to the public, ladies and gentlemen, and the media. I think firstly, starting off, it is going to be a difficult winter, as the chairman has indicated. And in this presentation, we'll highlight the contributing factors. Substantially, we're going into this winter with 3,000 megawatts less capacity than we had during the last winter. 3 units of Kusile plus the 1 unit of Kuburg. However, the focus during this winter, first and foremost, must be the performance of the generation fleet around the energy availability factor. And in presenting this winter plan with the support of the system operator and energy planning under Mr. Skeppers, we really focused on the key objective to keep our unplanned loss factor at less than 15,000 megawatts. However, we know it's been a struggle to keep it at this level, and in maintaining that level of 15,000, that then corresponds to much more lower levels of load shedding during morning peaks, during the day and evening peaks. However, we will also indicate that if the interventions that we have planned for the winter does not achieve the desired outcomes and your UCLF unplanned outages reaches levels of 18,000 megawatts, then the likelihood of stage 8 load shedding during peaks is extremely high. I must take the opportunity again to reiterate that in terms of a national blackout, we are confident that that will not occur because of the interventions and the control mechanisms that we have in place through a competent system operator team and obviously led by Mr. Skeppers. More importantly, load shedding is necessary to keep control of the transmission grid, which is critical, and that is why the choice of the levels of load shedding is then executed to still remain in control of the grid. During this winter, Becky will touch on what generation is doing in terms of energy availability factor. It's important to improve the performance of the stations that the chairman has indicated. And then in the medium term, throughout this calendar year, we focus on the recovery and restoration and bringing online Kusile units 1, 2, and 3 as part of the temporary stack recovery. That will be followed by the permanent stack recovery. We would need the support of environmental affairs to operate those plants come November, December. But also what we will utilize during this winter period is much more higher utilization of OCGTs within the budgets that are allocated following the NERSA decision and the debt relief. In total for this calendar year, generation has 20 billion available to spend on OCGTs. The recovery plan will be touched on, but it's important, you will see when Monde presents, the need for DSM as another lever to manage the demand. We must also have an appreciation that over and above what Eskom needs to do within its control, having more capacity and megawatts onto the grid is essential to give us stability in terms of the electricity sector and reliability. Minister Mantashe announced various bid windows in his budget vote around bid window 7 and 8 of relating to renewables of 5,000 megawatts. The positive announcement around battery storage of 1,230 megawatts, and then gas to power of 3,000 megawatts. That we must acknowledge that that generation capacity will require, from a transmission perspective, that the grid availability and constraints needs to be addressed. And as indicated by the chairman, the importance of the transmission development plan and that acceleration of that transmission development plan. That transmission doesn't become the constraint going forward for the industry and the economy. Just with regard to positive developments, NICOM has been very supportive of Eskom under the leadership of the electricity minister, supported by all the other ministers. We welcome that and these robust engagements. We know the importance of working with Minister of Forestries and Fisheries in terms of dealing with air quality requirements and emission requirements in balancing the needs of supply of electricity to the citizens of the country. Financially, I think following those two decisions of the regulator as well as the debt relief, we are definitely in a much more better position. As the chairman has indicated, we've now allocated and released capital expenditure across generation, transmission and distribution for the next 3 years. We are comfortable and confident that we'll be able to increase that to a 5-year horizon. That should then allow for the necessary execution of those capital plans, acquiring of spares well in advance to execute more timeously and efficiently in terms of the important outages at a generation level. But let's also acknowledge that in terms of where we wanted to be at the end of March 2023, of a 60% EAF, we fell short of that. We landed at 56%. It has deteriorated since currently sitting at 52%, and Becky will touch on that important recovery. I've touched on the importance of adding megawatts and having that grid availability as and when those megawatts come online, also coupled with independent megawatts in terms of the announcement by the president in terms of independent companies can also bring megawatts onto the grid. So that is important. The combination of new capacity, our own generation performance improving, and then bringing that together with demand-side management initiatives to balance the supply and demand. Overall, notwithstanding all of that, we allowed the system operator within their capabilities to manage the grid and then to implement the necessary stages of load shedding to prevent a blackout for the country. I will now hand over to Becky, Mr. Skeepers, to take us through the outlook for the winter, and then that will be followed by Becky and then Mr. Bala. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for this opportunity to share with you the outlook for winter from the system operator's perspective. As has been indicated, and I think is now common cause, this is going to be a very, very tight winter in terms of supply and demand balance. What we show on the screen is just a snapshot of a scenario that we could be dealing with. We have an install base of some 47,500 megawatts of generation, and we have studied scenarios of unplanned capability, load losses, breakdowns, ranging between 15,000 megawatts and 18,000 megawatts. What has already been explained is that what is contained in there already includes the losses that we've suffered with the delays on Quebec Unit 1, as well as the unavailability of Kusile Units 1, 2, and 3. We clearly have said we need to continue to carry out reliability maintenance and that will range between 3,000 to 6,700 megawatts. In a later slide, Mr. Ngumalo will indicate what the outlook is more specifically in terms of what is planned. But clearly, as we go into the high demand period, we actually plan to do less maintenance intentionally, and that has been the pattern all along, and you'll see what that looks like. But what this then tells us is we have available capacity at the end of the day of some 26,500 megawatts. If you look on the graph on the right-hand side, where we have available 26,500, but we project demand potentially peaking at some 33,000 megawatts. So we have a shortfall, and that is the period into which we are operating and we are moving in with time, and hence the challenge that we have. One of the other factors that impact what happens on a daily basis is really the unpredictability of the performance, and that you have swings that you may actually find that you start the day off on a good footing, but as day progresses, certain things happen, and then you find that the situation changes, in which case we, as usual, would notify the public around the changing circumstances and, if necessary, increase the level of alert for the system. There's been a question raised previously around what is different between this winter and last year's winter, and this is what we are trying to demonstrate here. In terms of capacity that's available, as we've indicated, we are starting on the back foot with 3,080 megawatts less capacity available because of Kusile 1, 2, and 3, as well as Quebec 1, which is on outage, and unfortunately won't be available during the winter. The planned maintenance will range between 1,300 megawatts and 3,000 megawatts, but this pattern is really fairly similar this year to last year. We've had an additional 75 megawatts added to the grid through the IPP program, and with the standard offer program that we are running, we have already contracted 100 megawatts that should be contributing to the system during this winter, and we are expecting that to increase. And we are working hard to make sure that we get as much additional capacity onto the system as possible. And then we also have received approval to procure in terms of the emergency generator program, and we're expecting 290 megawatts from that effort. On the demand side, we expect between 33,000 and 34,000 megawatts of peak demand. We have made efforts through the demand response program, and we have added 151 megawatts since last year, April. And on the DSM side, 57 megawatts already higher than last year, which I think is a positive move. On the power alert, which I trust colleagues are aware of, which is flooded on television, we typically get up to 270 megawatts at peak, but this is a fairly mature program, but we are hoping that the public will keep paying attention and responding appropriately to reduce demand as far as they can. All right, so in terms of the winter outlook, we consider three scenarios, and what this indicates is that depending on where we land on a particular day, we may have up to stage 8 load shedding if our interventions to reduce demand and improve reliability are not effective. So it's a risk-based kind of assessment. And what we are indicating is that the base case is up to 15,000 megawatts, in which case, as you will note, according to the table, we're going to have load shedding ranging between stage 3 and stage 5 between now and the end of August. And you can see for yourself the number of days that we project potentially to be at risk in that scenario. What I think we also need to appreciate is that in reality, this is not static. It is very dynamic, and we move between scenarios during the course of the day. So this is really just a highly simplified view of what may happen. If we go up to 18,000 megawatts of breakdowns, there is a likelihood that we would be at stage 7, load shedding, and potentially even stage 8, especially when you go into July and August when demand is higher. So this is going to be a very difficult winter, and hence our plea to customers to reduce as far as they can, to use only what they need. And this goes to households, businesses, industry, and so on, because we are in a difficult space and we really need all of us to make efforts to contribute. There are various risks that apply during this period, and I think we just need to remind ourselves of this. Firstly, the reason for the load shedding, I trust, is now well understood, that we are doing this to maintain stability of the power system, to ensure that supply and demand remain in balance at all times. It's a very painful thing to do, but it's very necessary to avoid something even worse, which is a blackout. The tightness of the winter outlook, I think we've discussed already. What that also does is, if we have delays in returning units to service, there's a knock-on impact because we don't really have spare capacity on the network to move outages around. So we really operating under very pressurized conditions to make sure that we do what we can to do the maintenance, return units on time, and avoid a knock-on impact that will put us again on the backlog. We also know that we've had the unfortunate experience that occasionally there have been sporadic incidents of industrial action. We are an essential service and we are not allowed to strike as Eskom employees, but there have been incidents, as I think you are aware of, that has happened. We have not catered for that in this plan. So we are obviously working closely with our organized labor colleagues and employees to say, let us be disciplined and maintain the system stability, even as other matters are being discussed between management and organized labor. I've already spoken about the variance in the breakdowns that can go between up to 4,000 megawatts overall, and that is something that presents a challenge in from a point that this is not all predictable. And lastly, we have spoken already about the unavailability of the 3 units at Kusile, as well as Quebec 1, taking us 3,080 megawatts into the red, and clearly that puts us in an extremely difficult position already. I think it's important that we reiterate this message that the increased load shedding does not mean we are at a greater risk of a national blackout. We've got a nice graphic here that indicates that with load shedding, we have a controlled reduction of demand to match the available supply. We schedule this ahead of time. We operate this as Eskom, the municipalities as distributors, in a way that it is all controlled. And it is a proactive action to ensure that from national control all the way down to the municipalities, that we manage supply and demand appropriately. And this is something that we believe is the best we can do. The alternative, which is a national blackout, is really a nightmare scenario because it would mean this is an uncontrolled situation where we lose supply across the whole country. And that's really something we have to do everything to avoid getting into. It would also mean that for this to happen, you need multiple systems to fail. So it's a very low likelihood event, but clearly if it happens, the impact would be very significant. If one looks at events across the world where there have been blackouts, it's been firstly something that came unexpectedly. It follows, for example, a significant weather event, be it a tornado or a storm, that takes out critical infrastructure, and then there is a cascading effect that can then lead you into tripping of more lines and then more generators, and then you lose the whole supply. So it's a very low likelihood event. The power system is designed to avoid getting here. From the level of reserves that you maintain, which is part of why we do load shedding, is to try to preserve the reserves so that if unexpected events happen, the system can cope. From the protection systems that are there to ensure that if there are unexpected events, there is interventions that are automatically taken to bring back, to avoid this running away. So load shedding is not a blackout. A blackout is something that is uncontrolled, and it would mean there's no power across the country. That, ladies and gentlemen, is my last slide. Mr. Numalo will come up and share with you some of the work that is happening on the generation side to ensure that the maintenance is carried out and that we improve the position we are in. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ndate Skippers, Chairman of the Board, Eskom members, the media, and the public, good morning. I think it has been said that we are actually going through extremely difficult period this winter. And there were things that we needed to do because we needed to deal with the situation now in the short term to go through the winter and also through, while also not forgetting that this company needs to still run for the future. So given the severity of the load shedding, the immediate things that we needed to do beginning of this financial year was to return key units that were on the breakdown. Units like Medupi 6, Letabo 6, Matla 6 on the bigger units, and those 2 units at Tutuga. I'm quite pleased to report that that Medupi 6 has been returned to service and is running extremely well. And I think there is a story that we need to tell regarding the Medupi, because Medupi is one of the stations we said we needed now to maintain the good performance. With the return of Unit 6, Medupi is currently running over 92% availability. So I think given where we come from with this new build program, I think it's quite important that I emphasize the great work that Zweli and the team are doing up there. Letabo continue as well to do extremely well with the return of Unit 6. And then obviously Matla also returned this past week from that unplanned. Tutuga continue to be the one of our stations that is giving us problems. But we have also acted swiftly there. As of the beginning of this month, we have already appointed an experienced general manager for that plant. And I must say, I'm quite confident that Mr. Moyo and the team, they will manage to turn that power station around. So we're hoping to see some stability. On the scenario that Mr. Skippers have shared with us, he showed that at 15,000 and below in terms of unavailability, the levels of load sheddings are much better. And that's what we are trying to achieve as a first step within the generation fleet. You see, we need to try and maintain below so that we don't go to the higher stages. It has been going there because of those breakdowns, especially with the bigger machines. And I think one of the things that makes it worse is that we have got that 2,100 from Usile that is permanently there. So everything we do, we need to work on top of that. And I think in terms of the maintenance for this winter period, obviously as part of our cycle, as mentioned by Spomutso, we are looking at having very few units running there, one of them being Kubek 1. And then we also got a Kendall machine there and also the one at Ngula that's going to be running through this winter. Obviously, we will have some of the short-term maintenance interventions that we will be dealing with during this time. We plan to peak the gas utilization at around 20% for this year. I think the acting GCE has touched on the level of budget that we have for this year, which is about 20 billion. And that will also assist us. On the demand side management, my colleagues Monday will touch on that, but there has been a lot of work that has been done on that space within the company as well, and we are hoping that it's also all these efforts will assist us to deal with this winter period. I think while we are looking at this period as well, we need to not to lose focus on the mid to long-term focus in terms of where we are going as generation. I think the return of Quebec is for the first time actually we go through winter without both Quebec's machine. And I think the other fact that we have also omitted is for the first time in the past decade that we're also going through winter without any unit at Komati Power Station. So all these issues have compounded our difficult winter that we are facing. Kusile, the teams there, led by our project team, recovering those 3 units that got damaged. So they are working hard. I think all efforts are there to make sure that by the end of this year, these machines return. Then on top of that, we're also planning to bring back bring to line the Kusile Unit 5. This is one of the new units. As you know, Kusile has not completed with the build program. So Unit 5, all these 4 units at Kusile, we plan them to come back in December. Obviously, the first 3, because of the temporary stacks, they will not be doing full capacity. They will be delivering about 520. But then the rest, the new one, will come in at a full capacity. And then Medupi 4, again, given the performance of Medupi now, after we have understand the issues with the designs, so it's really one of the units that we're looking forward to. We are also reinforcing the team that is recovering that unit, just to make sure that there's proper oversight to ensure that we don't sleep on that July date of next year. That will give us some stability as well. On this slide, I just want to share that the board approved recovery plan for generation. We have not changed. The chairman spoke about 65% end of March and 70% of end of March 25. That is still the focus that we are driving within the generation. I think this is where we get our roadmap. I know it's going to be a tough call, but we believe it is doable. We can really deal with that. I think maintaining performance on the first set of the currently top performing plant, Medupi, Letabo, Matimba, and Peking plants, is absolutely critical. And those stations, they continue to do well. It's quite pleasing to see that of late, the Duva Power Station, they've been showing some good signs of improvement, running 5 of their units that are available. So is Majuba. So we are starting to see that this can be done as well with a proper leadership focus on those plants. And Kendall, we've also got a very experienced general manager there to assist. Matra as well is coming quite nicely as well. It was disturbed by the failure on Unit 6, which they have now returned. And we are looking forward that the station start to perform at the levels where we are expecting them to perform. And the next, on the financial year, this year, the units at Kusile, I've already spoken about, that their return is critical because these are bigger units, so as Quebec. So once we have achieved that, and then lastly, obviously, Quebec, as Quebec 1 come back, we need to take Quebec 2 off to continue with the steam generator replacement program. I think we have picked up some good lessons on this first unit that I was with the team last week, and then we've went through some of the lessons as well. So we're planning that the next unit will go much better than the previous one. And I think one thing that we have agreed, which I've also, with the support from the board as well, that the leadership stability within the generation fleet is critical. And that's my first priority there. So, like I've mentioned, what we have done already, we have delayered the generation business. Some of the experienced general managers that were running clusters, they've been put back into the power station. One of them is running the Tutuka power station now. And then one of them is went back to the primary energy division so that we've got experienced people who knows what need to be done so that we don't run around everywhere. So we have done that as well. And all of them, they've been placed in business. And then also the first thing that we've done is also to make sure that at power station levels, the acting staff are minimized. And the plan that I have is that by the end of this month, all power station managers will be appointed, and then make sure that, because all it needs is going to take leadership for us to turn this one around. And then part of the leadership issues as well, I must say I've engaged with our trade unions, and they've also pledged their support in terms of what we need to do. And the last point there that I want to touch on is the point with regards to the government support. And then on top of the government, I must say from the board as well, I've been receiving extremely huge support as well in terms of what we needed to make sure that we drive the turnaround as they approved it. But one of the key issues that came from our Minister of DPE was this thing of saying, what is other state-owned companies do that we can leverage quickly with them? So in our turbine space within our Rotec Industries, we are already working with SAA, and there's good collaboration that is happening there in terms of, because they maintain a lot of planes as well, so they've come up with some good initiatives. So as Dinel as well, so we are looking to partner with them in a lot of other areas, including the security space, because they are specializing on that in terms of monitoring our plants and also the rest of the station as well. I think the issue of environmental for unit Setusile is going to be critical, but I know that the government and our team from environment is working with the Department of Environmental Affairs to make sure that we get those permits to operate this unit after this initial returns. And we are also working in terms of our own gas turbine stations to ensure that we try to convert them to gas as well. So we have issued the RFP to the market, so we're hoping to get those results by the end of June or July actually, then we can start to do those evaluations in this space here. So yeah, colleagues, before I go to that slide that Mr. Bala will touch on, that is where we are as generation. The primary focus is really on leadership, stabilizing leadership, showing experienced people run our difficult plant, because you will imagine if you get an inexperienced person, then they start to panic and then they cause more problems for us. So I'm quite positive that with the team that we have put in place now in a very short space of time, we need to start to see stability within the generation fleet as we move around. But it's going to still be a huge challenge until those Kusile units return and also the Copex machines return. But we've got a job to do now. Focus is on the current fleet. We need to make sure that we don't look any other things. We focus on turning around the current fleet, because that's what we have, and that's what the board expects us to do as well, and that's where they are also giving us support. So, Ndatebala, I'll give over to you just to touch on this. Next slide, thanks.
Thank you, Zwide. As Slide of the Eskom board, my colleagues, the Eskom guardians, and to the media houses, good morning. Yeah, okay, there we go. All right, so, whilst our colleagues in the generation space spending their effort tirelessly in fixing the plant, whilst all those who've got generation capacity are trying to add megawatts onto the grid, we believe that there is a lot that South Africans can do in ensuring that we manage the demand and manage how we utilize the electricity that is scarce, the electricity that we have. So on the demand side, we are calling to action for this particular winter on all South Africans to protect our electricity supply and reduce the stages of load shedding. What we have done, the chair has alluded to the previous program that we ran, of the 49M. Through those interventions, we have ramped up what is available on the demand side up to 4.5 gigawatt on the demand side program. On the 24th of April, again as alluded by the chairman, of 2023, we launched the Eskom demand side management program through the DSM Indaba, whereby we put in action programs that is aimed at increasing that 4.5 gigawatts. We have deployed a large fleet, and we continue to do so, of smart meters. This, we believe that we can better utilize our smart meters to do what is referred to as load management, whereby, again, we incentivize customers during times of constraint to use less of the electricity that they have. We will be launching very soon our media campaign, an aggressive media campaign, whereby we're calling all of us to action. Over and above that, we have implemented various pilots across all sectors of the electricity supply chain. This includes industry, this includes commercial, including residential. So far, we have launched different programs, specifically on the load management side, whereby we seek to reduce the demand, specifically in terms of constraint, specifically at peak times. We have launched the residential load management programs, whereby we incentivize residential customers to manage specifically on the geyser consumption, specifically to shift load. Over and above that, we have also introduced energy efficiency programs, whereby, again, we incentivize all sectors to be more energy efficient. This is by utilizing low consumption lighting and also appliances that use less electricity. So what you can do to help, how can you help to reduce load shedding? Firstly, we believe that we can all reduce our electricity consumption by just using what we need. We need to switch off what we do not use at the time. We need to protect the infrastructure that we have. We need to stop illegal connections, stopping the Izinyoga. Also, the issue of payment of what we consume, we need to do that. Lastly, we have seen a phenomena, specifically with increased stages of load shedding, whereby immediately after load shedding, we're seeing a new peak now. This is largely attributable to when the batteries charge up. So we are going to be running a program that seeks to shift the charging of the inverter systems just to periods not immediately after load shedding. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think that is the programs that will be running on the demand side management. Mr. Cassim, back to you.
Thank you, Monde. So, in conclusion, I think first and foremost, Eskom apologizes to all South Africans in terms of the inconvenience, the impact on your livelihoods, and more importantly, the impact on the economy. We are doing our best to limit the impact of load shedding, whilst first and foremost ensuring the protection of the grid. As we've indicated, a combination of our own performance, demand side management initiatives, as well as adding megawatts to the grid will help reduce the impact during this winter. It is going to be a difficult winter. I think also just to have an appreciation and understand, when we talk about the stages of load shedding, in terms of hours to the consumer, stage 6 load shedding equates to 12 hours of interrupted supply in a 32-hour cycle. In the event that we get to stage 8 load shedding, those hours of interruptions will increase from 12 hours in the 32-hour cycle to 16 hours in a 32-hour cycle, just for an understanding and to understand how it will impact on consumers in the event that we do experience stage 8. But most importantly, the goal, the objective to Becky, but supported by the rest of the EXCO and all the Eskom guardians, is to try to minimize that by keeping that UCLF at the 15,000 megawatts, which then avoids a situation of getting to these higher stages of load shedding. Thank you for the opportunity. Definitely, let me hand back to you.
Thank you, members of the panel. We are going to take questions, and we will be responding to those questions. How this will be run, we'll have one round of questions per media house or media company, and we'll then go for, and we'll start with the colleagues in the room. Thereafter, we'll take 5 questions, and then thereafter, we'll take 5 questions from the colleagues that have connected remotely. And then we'll have a round of follow-up questions. And if time allows, we'll go for the second round. And our dead stop, as I've mentioned, it's 9:45, so that we can allow for the one-on-one interviews. Okay, so I'll start with the questions. We've got Bongani Hans from Sunday Independent newspaper. He would like to know or if Eskom can clarify a document called NRS 048 Part 9, Edition 3, that is under construction by the National Regulatory Services Association of South Africa, which is, in his understanding, would allow Eskom to implement load shedding beyond stage 8 and all the way to stage 16. Now, EFF leader Julius Malema also warns South Africans that in the near future, Eskom's problems may worsen, leading to extreme challenges in providing electricity. So he's got 4 questions. I'm going to take the first question. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're putting, as I'm saying that I'm going to allow 1 question, so if you must make sure that your questions or your first question is the one that you want us to answer. Otherwise, the rest of the questions will respond to them later. So his first question is, with what I have mentioned above, it seems there's a reason for South Africans to panic, as it seems like electricity problems are worsening instead of improving. Is it me? There we go. The next question is from Antoinette Slabert from Rapport. Your scenario slide shows peak demands forecast of 32,500 megawatts at the most, but you expect demand of up to 34,000 megawatts, correct? Why is that, and does it mean your assumptions are unrealistically conservative and load shedding may even get worse than shown? And then we've got Ritumetsi Makwea from the Citizen News. His question is that this morning the ANC Secretary General Fikile Mbalula said load shedding will be over by end of the year 2023. That is, he said government is on top of the crisis, but it seems like the stats say otherwise. What exactly is the timeline? Is there an end in sight? From Chris Yelland, from the EE Business Intelligence, can you tell us what is the average percentage load curtailment that has been required by the Eskom system operator from its key industrial customers, while South Africa has been on stage 6 load shedding this year since 1st January 2023. Can you tell us the amount in megawatts? What would the level of load curtailment be if we move to level 8? So I'll end there with the questions that came through the chats, and I'll go, I'll take this opportunity and give it to the members of the panel, and then we can then take questions from the House. I think I've done things the other way around. My apologies.
We'll go back to the NRS, and Sekhamotso will deal with that.
Okay.
Daphne, if you can just put that question up again. Thanks.
No, I'll deal with the NRS question. Thanks, Caleb. So, yeah, I think when we realized that we required higher stages of load shedding, it was incumbent upon us to ensure that we remain in control of the system. As Dr. Skeepers has said, that we need to always manage to retain control of the system. So that then necessitated that we have load shedding schedules that talk to stages higher than stage 4 and stage 6. We then thought it necessary to look at what would be some of the worst case scenarios. We then decided to take it all the way up to stage 16. With that, as we are not the only people that implement load shedding, we needed to ensure that also in the municipal space, as distributors, that they also have their schedules updated up to stage 16. So it was a preemptive but necessary exercise. Otherwise, we would really then be out of control had we gone to stages beyond stage 6, as we've had at the time. So, yeah, I think that then talks to the issue of stages beyond stage 6. Thanks, Caleb.
Okay, thank you very much. If you could go to the next question, please. Daphne?
Yeah, this thing is not working. Teresa? Next slide, please.
Yes, so thank you very much to the question from Antoinette. The actual demand forecast for this year is 33,000 megawatts, not 34,000 megawatts. But as we all know, this is really a forecast of peak demand, and there is potential for variability around that number. So we do try to give the most robust and realistic assumptions in the modeling and the analysis that we do. And of course, it could be up or down. There is always some variability. Thank you very much.
Okay, Daphne, the question about will load shedding end by the end of 2023? I think as we've indicated in today's presentation, most important factor is to protect the grid and avoid a blackout. In the event that load shedding is required to keep the grid stable, that is the decision that the system operator will make. We've reiterated the importance of improving our performance in terms of generation, as well as bringing more megawatts online. Ultimately, per the recovery plan, is to reduce the stages of load shedding going forward, and then to eventually get to a point where load shedding is behind us. But most importantly, it is going to be a difficult winter, as well as we see that even the remaining part of the year is still quite challenging. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Calib. If I can respond to the question from Chris Yerent regarding load curtailment. Chris, we don't have the responses in the format of a percentage. We will work those out and share them. What we can say at the moment is that since the beginning of this year, January, we've had 33 days of load curtailment, and 18 of those 33 were at stages 1 and 2, and a further 18 were at stage 4. But we will work out the percentage as requested and revert. Thank you.
Yes, Heidi? Yes, please introduce yourself and the media company that you are representing before you ask your question. Thank you.
Okay, it's Heidi Jacques from ENCA. With all due respect, I just don't understand how you tell South Africans that we should reduce our electricity supply when, firstly, we don't even have it for most of the day. What exactly is being done other than what you've mentioned? Because the issue of Kusile and Kuberg is not a new issue, and Medupi, it's not a new issue. These issues started last year. So you were aware that you were going to be 3,000 megawatts short for the winter period. So why weren't there any plans in place to make sure that we don't have a very difficult and tight winter? I also just want to ask in terms of your diesel supply, the Minister of Public Enterprises yesterday before SCOPA alluded to the fact that there are issues with Petro SA because they are not reducing the cost of diesel that is sold to Eskom, which could ultimately reduce one stage of load shedding if that cost is reduced. What is the plan in terms of that, of the diesel? And then, I don't know if I can ask this, but I'm going to anyway. Wage talks with the unions. There have been concerns that Eskom is not willing to budge beyond 3.75%. And the unions have indicated that you are not willing to negotiate in good faith. What is the update on that? Thank you.
Can we please keep to one question, Heidi, colleagues, so that we can be fair to all media houses? Thank you.
Morning. My apologies. I also have many questions. My name is Govan Whittles from Newsroom Africa, Channel 405. Thank you for the opportunity. To the board chairperson, will the board consider pressing criminal charges against the former CEO over the breaches you've described that occurred in his book? To the head of generation, is the frequency of unplanned losses at power stations increasing or decreasing? The energy availability factor has decreased. Do you foresee this as a pattern that's likely to continue? You've described the unavailability of any generation at Komati for the first time in a decade. Is there no renewable power being generated from Komati or being put into the grid? Lastly, to the head of distribution. So you've indicated that Eskom plans to roll out a program to deal with a new increased peak where you're seeing inverters being charged immediately after load shedding ends. Are you going to call on South Africans not to charge the inverters after load shedding ends, or what exactly does that entail? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, Jacques from CGTN. I'm asking this on behalf of Angelo Coppola. Why did Eskom decide to legally fight the
Can you
request?
just state your media house again?
Sorry, CGTN, China Global Television. Why did Eskom decide to legally fight the request from the Frankfurt municipality to use a solar power-driven microgrid to alleviate some load shedding in the Free State town? Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Looks like that's the only round of questions that all the questions that we have for this round. Can I hand over to the panel?
I will go first. I'll deal with Heidi's questions. Yeah, maybe just easier one in terms of the wage talks. We're still in that process. We will do a third iteration with the unions. I think that starts next week. And then obviously as management, we will take into account where we are in those negotiations and then engage with them in good faith. So I can't disclose more than that in terms of the wage talks. With regard to Petro SA, in terms of what we pay, there's an wholesale price as well as a discount in terms of the contractual arrangement with Petro SA. We have a very good relationship with them. And then again, I'm sure they recognize and appreciate the importance of diesel in one of the levers to address load shedding and minimize the impact. And we will work with them in terms of that. If we can get it even far cheaper, that is the intention. However, there is an appreciation. Let's acknowledge in terms of the OCGTs, we have 2,000 megawatts. There's 1,000 megawatts from the IPPs. With the gap that's indicated, it means the rest of generation must also come to the party. Maybe let me just complete on the diesel. We did mention in the presentation the 20 billion for our OCGT plants. As part of the budget, we've also have 10 billion rand for the diesel IPPs. So in total, Eskom's OCGTs and the IPPs comes to 30 billion. In terms, did we know about this and could we have done better? I think in terms of Kusile, we're busy with those temporary stacks. It does take time. That is unfortunate. We're working as fast as possible. And with regard to Kubert, in terms of the requirements of embarking on and achieving the extension of the lives of Kuberg, that is the cycle in which the outages are done. And we'll have to deal with that challenge of not having those megawatts. I think we must also acknowledge that new capacity has not come onto the grid as was originally envisaged. That has put additional pressure on Eskom. If I then hand over maybe to the chairman to deal with Govan Whittle's question.
Thank you, Caleb. The question raised by Govan also relates to the question raised by Terence Creamer, the first question there. We are going to embark upon a governance review. So our company secretary is already looking at various resources that we will leverage from various kind of legal counsel, learned friends in company law and corporate governance. We should let the process run its course and then benefit from the full report that will come from there. And that's what will then guide the board. So I don't want to preempt that process. Thank you.
Yeah, just to answer the question with regard to from Newsroom Africa in terms of the decreasing or increasing in terms of our availability. I think at this stage it's still very, the variation is still very high, but like I've mentioned that we have seen that in some of the stations, like if you remember 3 years ago, Mitupi was actually in the same position and it is now very stable now. Mitupi, we can say now it has gone through the testing period of coming to the stream, so the team seems to have gotten now to understand that. But also we are seeing some improvement on some of the plants, like I've mentioned, especially Dover, Arnott, and Majuba as well, that we are seeing some improvement, although it's not yet where we are expecting it to be. So there's continuous work that we still need to do there. And in terms of the renewables that replaced the likes of Komati, you know, Komati is a 1,100 megawatt plant, so we haven't been able to bring new renewables to that effect as well. Hence, I was making that statement. And then I think my colleagues Monday will deal the microgrid one.
Yeah, no, thanks, Peggy. Yeah, Heidi, I think there's quite a number of things that South Africans can do in managing how we utilize electricity. The typical South African profile is that you will have a peak consumption in the morning and a steeper peak in the evening. So our belief is that if you shift consumption mainly in the residential sector to outside of those peak periods, then you get a flatter profile, which then is much better for the system to handle. So that is the appeal to South Africans. Say, besides the energy efficiency, then let's also maybe move the times when you consume electricity. So things like geysers, we can move the lighting up of geysers to outside of those periods. So there's quite a significant contribution that we can make. Whatever kilowatt or megawatt that we can save, it will be a kilowatt that can assist in terms of the energy situation. I would like to emphasize the fact that we encourage every South African and every sector of the industry that has got generating capacity to do so. We are hard at work to ensure that we connect whatever generator that is available. We are looking at streamlining our processes to make sure that we shorten all the timeframes to connect whatever generation capacity is available. So on the question of the inverters, again, it comes back to say, when do you recharge your inverter? What I've said we are seeing is that immediately after load shedding, then the charging starts up, which then moves that peak. So we're saying that in how we do that, we can do so again in a manner that does not put the system at risk. Just to respond to the issue of the rural maintenance and the Frankfurt issue, where we were taken to court for apparently not disincentivizing people to help themselves. Yeah, I think safe to say that we are working with rural maintenance on how best we can deal with their situation. Maybe just a bit of background. So rural maintenance came to Eskom say, can we please, we have got this generating capacity, can we do our own load shedding? We said yes. So that's what has happened. What is clear is that in terms of their own generation, it's insufficient to cater for their total demand. So the rules of the load shedding regime, in accordance with NRSO 48.9, is that at the time when we need to reduce the demand to match supply, we look across the base. So that's where we are on the Frankfurt situation. Again, we are working with them to say how best we can how best we can deal with that particular situation. But in as far as them doing their own generation, that is it's something that we strongly encourage. We strongly encourage every South African to do the same. Thank you.
We've covered Terence's questions, and then I'll give Becky to deal with Janine Erasmus and Carol Patent around the UCLF.
Okay, let's ask the question. So there's also Janine Erasmus from Business Day. The question is, what has been the average unplanned outages for the last 2 months? And then Carol Payton from News 24, what has been the average UCLF for this financial year so far? In terms of EE business intelligence, please clarify the average in the calendar, Miriam Issa. Please clarify clarify the average in the calendar year to date, and importantly, the diesel budget. I think the Terence Creamer question from Engineering News has been responded to already. Thank you. Over to you, panel members.
Thanks, Daphne. I think both questions from Deneen and Carol, they are almost the same, talking about the UCLF year to date. It's been ranging between 16 and 17,000, which that's culminated to about 52%. That's where it currently is. That's what we want, trying to improve with those initiatives that I've mentioned. Thank you.
Okay.
I have spoken about the diesel budget, so that is confirmed. And I assume that, please clarify the average in the calendar year. Is that the UCLF that Becky has spoken about?
Okay, so it's the 30 billion and, all right, thank you. So, yes, we can now go for another bite from the colleagues in the House. I don't see any hands. Oh.
Hi, I'm Erik Esbjörnsson for Swedish newspaper Dagens Nyheter. My question is more broad range. Like, we are fresh out of a power crisis in Europe caused by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. There, the discussion has been the entire time about the costs of electricity, not any load shedding. My brother had, in Sweden, he had a power bill about 20 times bigger than mine in December. But still, the question about switching to fluctuating market prices for electricity during peak hours, and so it seems impossible here in South Africa. That would reduce demand significantly and create incentives for production as well, and basically solve the issue with load shedding. But is that a political or a technical challenge, and what are your thoughts around a different pricing structure for South African electricity?
Thank you. Heidi?
It's Heidi Jockus again from ENCA. I know you briefly touched on it, but South Africans are panicking, and I just want to get clarity on what is the highest stage that we're going to go to in winter? I know at the bottom it said possibly stage 8, but there's a stage 16. I don't even know if that was answered. But what are we planning for? Because clearly there is a crisis, and we need to know so we can plan. So could you please just clarify on that? Thanks.
Good morning again. Govan Whittles from Newsroom Africa. Feedback on the rate of sabotage at power stations. Has this completely stopped, or is it still happening? And then, is 18,000 megawatts lost equal stage 8? Just to be clear, thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any hands, so we can go for the responses. Thank you, members of the panel.
Thanks. I'll deal with Eric's one on a new pricing structure. I think first and foremost, you got to follow the policy which is set in terms of the Electricity Regulation Act. That is then coupled with the electricity pricing policy, and then in terms of NERSA and the multi-year price determination methodology. That is being looked at in terms of that change in amendments to the Act as well as the electricity pricing policy. In the short term, no, we will still work within the current pricing mechanism. We already have a decision for next year of 12.65%, and then we will follow a similar cycle for the years thereafter until legislation has changed and those policies have been implemented. Thanks. So, Sekmosi, you want to deal with stage 8 to 16 or?
Yes, thanks, Caleb. Heidi, I think what my colleague Mr. Bala has indicated is that in terms of the approved standard, we currently stop at stage 8. That is the approved standard as we speak. There is work in progress in parallel to revise that standard to extend it to stage 16. So the stages beyond, the NRS doesn't, as we speak today, stops at stage 8. And work is in progress to look at extending that. So that is where we stand. in terms of the question around what is the outlook for winter, as we indicated, up to 18,000, there is a likelihood that we could go up to stage 8. That is what we shared on the slides. Now, there's a question that says, does 18 gigawatt unplanned equate to stage 8? Not necessarily, because you are dealing with both supply and demand. You are also dealing with what is your level of reserves at your disposal in terms of pump storage, in terms of the OCGTs. So it's actually a complex equation of trying to balance, because you have different contributors on the supply side, and equally on the demand side, you have different variables that impact on actual demand at a particular moment in time. So, in fact, we have had unplanned demand beyond 18,000 megawatts, and we were nowhere near stage 8. Just, if you look back a few months, we've actually been beyond 18,000. But given the level of demand and the available resources, we did not need to go higher than whether it was stage 6 or 4, I can't remember. So it's not a simple question just to equate one to the other. It actually depends on the combination of the factors at play at a particular point in time. I hope that clarifies. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe definitely let me deal with the issue of sabotage at the power station. Yeah, as you would appreciate, and it's a very difficult thing to quantify, but what we doing now, what we have agreed as generation leadership, that where there is incident of that will be reported to the authorities that are responsible for investigation. So with all the security and police, but ours is to focus on running the plant and making sure that we focus on maintenance and operation of the plant. But yeah, it's very difficult to conclusively say this is the levels of sabotage. Has it gone up or is it reducing at this stage? But wherever we pick up issues that we suspect, we report it so that we give the police to do their work while we are focusing, because I think that these are the things sometimes that distract us and we start focusing on other things instead of running the plant and allow the other government agencies to assist us to deal with other things that are outside the running of the power station. Thank you.
Thank you. There are more questions from the chat bot. The chat. From Antoinette Slabert report, we have had so many promises that energy availability factor will improve through maintenance, but it's continuously deteriorating. What will you do differently to get better outcomes than before? It looks like we didn't answer that question with our presentation, members of the panel. Bruce Hong from 567 Cape Talk. The minister and the presidency responsible for electricity is of the view that power ships are going to be needed to bring relief to our energy crisis. Is this on Eskom's plan at all? If so, have sites been identified and plans made to connect them on our grid? How soon could they be connected up? Weeks, months, yes? Another question from David Fraser from Investment Manager Peregrine Capital. On the Kusile Unit 1, 2, 3, you mentioned they would only come back at 520 megawatts each. What further work will need to be done to get them closer to the design capacity and how long would that work take? And when is this scheduled to be done? Last one from Antoinette Slabert from reports. It has been reported that Eskom pays a premium price for diesel from Petro SA. Is that correct? I'm not sure if we have responded to this question before. If not, how does this price Eskom pays compares to the market prices? Over to you, members of the panel.
Thank you, Daphne. Yeah, the first question from Antoinette deals with the promises. Yeah, unfortunately, it has been the case And in terms of what we are going to do differently, you will notice in my presentation that, and I just also responded there to say we are stopping focusing on other things than running the power station. And one of the things we are doing, we're putting now the experienced power station onto power station managers on the station that has been giving us problems. I must say as well, I've indicated that we have seen some good improvement at the plant like Metupi. I mean, Arnold, I spoke about 14% increase already this year on their EAF, so as Duva and Majuba. So there is some smaller improvement across, and we are expecting Matla as well to come in as well very shortly as they are bringing the units back. So these are the things. And I think one of the things also that we are focusing on, you know, as I'm going around the business, I see that we still got most of our employees around that are quite familiar with our plan. So I think that's what we are saying to them, to say it's going to take us as generation people to take ourselves out. There is a lot of support we are getting as well from the industry, which we are using wherever we need it. But in terms of the current, where I think we're going to get a change is through the enforcement of the leadership in those stations that are problematic. And then let me touch on the Gusile 1, 2, 3 as well, the 520. You will recall that there we are running this plant with temporary stacks. That's what 520 reflect to. And then as soon as we finish, as the units come back, then the work will start on the permanent replacement of the permanent structures. So which is planned as well for next year as well. As the structures are finished, then the units will return back to the full capacity. Thank you.
With regard to Bruce Hong's question in terms of power ships, that's within the domain of the Department of Minerals, Resource and Energy to add more megawatts to the grid. And whenever those processes are concluded, we would then add it to Eskom's grid. So really, that really falls in the domain of the DMRD.
Right.
Also dealt with the Petro SA question previously from Antoinette Starbutt, where we are with Petro SA. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there any hands from the House of follow-up questions or additional? Yes, Heidi?
Must I ask again on the mic? Did you hear my question, sir? Must I repeat it?
Please repeat it,
Okay,
Heidi.
I'm asking, you said that there are plans to move to stage 16, so I just want to know what that means. Like, how many hours of power will we be without? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other question from the House? None. Over to you, Mr. Ngumalo. 32. Yeah.
Yeah, so Heidi, perhaps just in terms of terminology, we are not planning to go to stage 16. What we are saying is in terms of preparedness, in the event there's a requirement to move to higher stages of load shedding, we believe it's important that there be proper schedules so that the public and customers can know what to expect in the event we get there. We are not planning to get there. I think Mr. Ngumalo has been very emphatic that all the efforts are to move away from these higher stages of load shedding. So maybe I think it's important that we help customers and the public to understand that once this process that is being run by the NRS committee is concluded, I think that information will become clearer because the different distributors will then be required to design the schedules to comply with whatever stage of load shedding beyond stage 8. I'm not sure if Mr. Bala would like to add. We are covered. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. I think the time it's 9:39. We can still go for the last round. We have additional questions from the chat. Antoinette Slabert, rapport. It has been reported that Eskom will approach NERSA for more money for diesel. Is that correct? If so, has such an approach been made? What regulatory mechanism is being used? If not, where will the extra money for diesel come from over and above the amount allowed by the regulator? David Fraser, investment manager, Peregrine Capital. The 20% OCGT usage through winter appears to be too low, given current circumstances. What are the obstacles around increasing the usage to 30 or 40% through the peak period? Another question from Antoinette Slabert report. Can you please explain Eskom's position regarding voiding as implemented by rural maintenance in Frankfurt and what that means for other renewable energy projects aimed at mitigating load shedding? Another question from Joseph Cotrila, I guess I'm spelling that correctly, Financial Times. What was the purpose of the acting chief executive's recent visit to China? Which Chinese entities did he speak to? Were offers of assistance made from the Chinese side? And if so, what were these offers and what will Eskom do with them now? I'm not sure if we haven't answered that question before in the media query, as part of the media query. Miriam Issa, EE Business Intelligence. Why are you no longer releasing the daily stats for peak demand and generation to the media, together with breakdowns? If I'm mistaken, where can we find them on regular basis? I think that one I can answer. We are sending on Twitter, but if they still, that's the last one. If the media houses want me to continue sending them on WhatsApp, I'll do that, but on Twitter, we are sending on daily basis. Thank you. Over to you, members.
Okay, thanks. With regard to Antoinette's question, is Eskom approaching NERSA? No, we're not. We already have a decision for the next 2 years. What does it mean in terms of extra funds? As I've indicated, 30 billion for the entire year. The only avenue we have as Eskom is, again, through our own efficiencies. In terms of the debt relief, we cannot borrow, so we have to live within what is available through the tariffs, effectively our operations, and then through the support we already have from government in terms of the debt relief. There is an opportunity, if we can improve the amount of collections from municipalities, where the arrears is standing at 57 billion, that will then bring in more cash to spend more on OCGTs. But there is no mechanism or any approach from Eskom to the regulator. I'll also touch on David's question of the 20% load factor. As we've indicated, that's what we are planning for this winter. You have to look at this across the 12 months that you need to then have this 20 billion for Eskom and the 10 billion for IPPs over the 12 months up until March 2024, unless there's another mechanisms of additional funds, which at this point doesn't exist. Maybe let me also address the Chinese visit. Minister of DPE has responded in Scopa, and then, as he indicated, once he's completed with his report, he will then communicate to the public. Thanks.
If I may deal with the issue from Antoinette on voiding. Eskom distribution as one of the licensed distributors is required by law to comply with the prescripts of NRS 048 Part 9. This applies to all other distributors in the country. So the term voiding is it's nowhere on the NRS of 048 Part 9. That was part of what we argued when we went to court with rural maintenance. So we are not familiar with the term voiding. What we are doing with any renewable or any generator for that matter is we are working to ensure that those get connected to the grid as quickly as possible so that we can start getting the benefit of the additional megawatts from whatever generation source is available. In as far as voiding is concerned, it was a term that was made up by rural maintenance, and it's a term that we are not familiar with. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, it's 9:45. We are going to stop here. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for coming through and all the questions. I hope we've clarified all the speculations that have been going out there in terms of what is going to happen in winter 2023. And we have now come to the end of our session, and thank you very much. God bless. So now we are going to move to the 15 minutes of the interviews. Thank you.